The South African Federation of Trade Unions and its affiliates, the Democratic Postal and Communications Union, says they are appalled by the mismanagement of the SA Post Office. The Post Office has unveiled their plan to retrench over 6,000 workers and downsize the current headcount from 16,000 in 2020 to about 9,000 in 2024. The plan is set to be on their restructuring plans that have, amongst others, identified the staff costs as the highest cost drivers of the cost base that far exceeds its revenues. To help us take this discussion further, we are now joined via Zoom by SAFTU spokesperson Trevor Shaku. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon, and thanks for giving us flow.
You're most welcome. We already sort of started to talk about what your reaction is on these planned retrenchments. But let's talk further on this, though. What then do you make of what the Post Office says, that they are planning? You've said you are appalled by this, planning to let go of 6,000 people, so 6,000 jobs then on the line. What do you say?
Yes, and actually, since we released that statement, I think 4 days later, on the 10th, the Post Office then submitted Section 189, which is the intent to retrench 6,000. Now, this makes us to revise our earlier projections of how much will this particular retrenchment have, because we thought at the time the retrenchment had already started, but it had not yet started. So the 6,000 actually would be against the total 13,990 workforce in the South African Post Office at the current moment, which was also as a result of retrenchments over the past period. Now, this will leave the South African Post Office with about 7,990 workers. It means that a lot of our workers actually are going to lose a lot of jobs. But this has, of course, an impact on the ability of the Post Office to be able to deliver adequate and quality service to our people where it serves them. And as a result, it has led to the Post Office closing a lot of its Post Office branches. And as a result, we are sitting with less than 1,300 post offices across the country. And 10 years ago, we had about 2,600 branches. So you can see there already that the problems that the South African Post Office is facing is having an impact, negative impact, first on the workers, but secondly on the beneficiaries of postal offices or postal services.
Yeah, how much are people still using the post office, though? I mean, you talk about 10 years ago. One might argue that, perhaps 10 years ago, more people were actually then using the post office. I mean, let's also talk about what these possible retrenchments are based on. Is there an issue of redundancy? I mean, what are we talking about here? And don't forget what I raised earlier, the fact that perhaps less people are actually using the post office. Would that be accurate?
Sure, thanks. The exact number of the people using postal services, especially through the post office, is not exact. The impact of the fourth industrial revolution, of course, would have reduced the intensity of people using, especially letters, because we now can text and mail.
Yes.
But there is an increase, of course, again, enabled by the very fourth industrial revolution, which has enabled us to be able to buy online and order parcels online. And as a result, there's a volume increase in such particular type of parcels which should be transported. But the post office, of course, has lost an opportunity to take advantage of this era or this particular development. One, because of the mismanagement over years, which have led to it failing to make economic profits. But of course, also, secondly, because government decided to defund it, and defunding it meant that it was not going in the context of a public institution which is supposed to provide services, or a state company which is supposed to provide services, not necessarily for the making of profit, it then meant that these people continuously would not be able to upgrade the equipment they use, upgrade the infrastructure they use, and as a result lost on the private players in the mailing and posting of parcels and all of that. But the other element of it is that, and this is where, in our view, one of the problems is that you can't allow the postal office to operate like a normal corporation, which would have to only depend on the healthiness of its balance sheet. Because if you do that, you are saying that these people must rely on their income in order to meet all their expenses. And as a result, in the context of a postal office, this has meant that it has failed to harness even the fourth industrial revolution. If you go to most of its post office branches, they are still using some of the most relic technological advances of the late 90s. They have not adapted, and as a result, they've lost the market to the private players. But there's an opportunity for the postal office to win that space back, and that is if it is capitalized by a government.
All right, let's leave it there. Trevor Shaku, thank you very much for giving us your time here. That is, of course, on the issue of the SA Post Office unveiling their plans to retrench over 6,000 workers. Their SAFTU spokesperson, Trevor Shaku.